Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Discover Your Dreams. This space is rooted in the grounded life philosophy where inner peace becomes the foundation for purposeful living. Here we focus on regulation, awareness, and conscious self-leadership as a way of returning to ourselves and meeting life from a more grounded place. Before we begin today, take one slow breath. Feel the air move in and move out. Let your shoulders drop, even just a little. Notice your body, how it's been carrying you, even on the days you forget to thank it. Now bring to mind all the energy you've poured into trying to improve yourself. All the hours spent striving to become someone better, someone calmer, someone more confident, someone more healed, someone who finally has it all figured out. You've worked so hard to become this imagined version of yourself. But today, I want to offer you a different possibility, one that might feel like a relief. Maybe the work was never about becoming someone else. Maybe the work has always been about remembering who you already are, who you were before the noise, before the expectations, before the world convinced you that you needed to be more or different or fixed. Today, I want to talk about what I believe is the heart of the grounded life philosophy. The return to yourself is the work. Not the climb, not the chase, not the endless self-editing. The return, the softening, the remembering. Because underneath all the striving, there is a version of you that is already whole, already wise, already enough. And that is where we begin. Most of us have been taught that growth is about adding something. More knowledge, more discipline, more confidence, more success, more achievements. We're conditioned to treat ourselves like ongoing projects, always under construction, always one upgrade away from finally being enough. We chase the next insight, the next habit, the next breakthrough, believing that if we just add one more thing, we'll finally become the person we're supposed to be. And while learning and growing are beautiful, necessary even, I've come to believe that much of the deepest work isn't about adding at all. It's about uncovering, peeling back the layers you built to survive, letting go of the stories that were never yours, releasing the versions of yourself you created to be accepted. It's about returning, coming home to the parts of you that got quiet. The parts that got buried under expectations, pressure, and comparison. It's about remembering your softness, your intuition, your inherent worth, remembering the self that existed before you were told who to be. Growth isn't always expansion. Sometimes it's excavation. Sometimes it's a gentle undoing. Sometimes it's simply finding your way back to what has always been true. There was a time in my life when I genuinely believed that if I just learned enough, read enough books, listened to enough teachers, worked hard enough on myself, eventually I'd become the person I was supposed to be. I treated growth like a destination, a place I could arrive at if I collected enough wisdom, fixed enough flaws, and perfected enough parts of myself. But the more I searched, the more I realized something unsettling. I wasn't moving closer to myself. I was drifting further away. Because every time I looked outside myself for the next answer, the next insight, the next step, I was reinforcing the belief that I didn't already have what I needed. I kept reaching outward instead of turning inward. I kept chasing guidance instead of becoming quiet enough to hear my own. And eventually, I had to face a truth I'd been avoiding. I wasn't lost because I didn't know enough. I was lost because I had forgotten how to listen to myself. The answers weren't hiding in the next book, the next teacher, the next breakthrough. They were waiting in the stillness, in the parts of me I had been too busy to notice. Sometimes the real work isn't seeking, it's softening, it's slowing down, it's remembering what was already there. Here's something I've learned. We all drift. We drift into fear, the quiet kind that whispers we're not ready. We drift into comparison, measuring ourselves against lives that were never ours to live. We drift into urgency, believing everything must happen right now or it doesn't count. We drift into people-pleasing, shaping ourselves to fit expectations that don't fit us back. We drift into self-doubt, questioning our worth, our path, our voice. We drift into old patterns, the familiar ones we swore we'd outgrown. Drifting isn't failure. It isn't a sign that you're broken or behind. It's part of being human, part of having a mind that worries, a heart that remembers, a nervous system that tries to protect you the only way it knows how. The question isn't, will I drift? Because you will. We all do. The real question is, do I know how to come back? Back to my breath, back to my body, back to my values, back to the truth of who I am. Back to the place inside me that never moved, even when I did. Drifting is inevitable. Returning is the practice. And every return is a homecoming. Ask yourself, where have I drifted lately? Not with judgment, just honesty. I used to think the goal was staying grounded all the time, as if true growth meant never wobbling, never losing my center, never getting swept up in old fears or familiar patterns. But now I see it differently. Staying centered isn't the point. It was never a realistic expectation in the first place. Life moves. We move with it. And of course we drift. The goal isn't to never leave center. The goal is to shorten the distance between drifting and returning. To notice the moment you've wandered, to feel the subtle shift in your body, to catch the old story before it takes over, to pause, breathe, and come back to yourself with a little more compassion than last time. That's where growth happens, not in perfect steadiness, but in the gentle, practiced return, in the way you learn to find your way back again and again without shame, without panic, without making your humanity a problem to solve. Growth is the shrinking of that gap, the softening of the journey home. I've had seasons where I felt completely disconnected from myself, where life became busy, so busy that I stopped noticing how tightly I was holding everything together, where things felt heavy, so heavy that I didn't realize how much I was carrying, where uncertainty crept in quietly and settled into the corners of my days. And before I knew it, I was living from habit instead of presence, going through motions, checking boxes, doing what needed to be done, but not really being in any of it. It was like I had slipped into a version of myself that was functioning, but not fully alive. The turning point wasn't some magical answer. It wasn't a breakthrough or a revelation or a perfectly timed insight. It was something much simpler, almost disappointingly simple. It was noticing. Noticing that I had drifted. Noticing that I felt far from myself. Noticing the quiet ache of disconnection. And then taking one breath, just one. A breath that said, I am here, I am listening, I'm coming back. And choosing to return again and again and again. Because coming back isn't a one-time event. It's a practice, a gentle, ongoing homecoming, a way of reminding yourself that even when you wander, you are never too far gone to return. This is why every pillar matters, not as abstract concepts, not as things to master, but as the quiet supports that make returning possible. Regulation helps you feel safe enough to return. It steadies your nervous system, softens the edges, and reminds your body that you don't have to brace for impact. Without safety, returning feels impossible. Awareness helps you notice you've wandered. It's the gentle light that reveals, oh, I've drifted. Not with judgment, but with clarity. Awareness is the moment you wake up inside your own life again. Detachment keeps you from identifying with the wandering. It reminds you that drifting is something you experience, not something you are. You are not your fear. You are not your old patterns. You are not the story your mind tells when it's tired. Detachment gives you the space to breathe. Alignment reminds you what feels true. It brings you back to your values, your integrity, your inner compass. It's the quiet knowing that says, this is who I am. This is what matters. Sovereignty gives you permission to trust the return. It's the reclamation of your inner authority. The understanding that you are allowed to choose yourself, to trust yourself, to come home to yourself without needing anyone else's approval. Everything points back to this one practice, returning, again and again, with softness, with honesty, with the understanding that the return is not a correction, it's a homecoming. I'm curious, when you notice you've drifted away from yourself, what's the first sign? Is it anxiety? Overthinking? Fatigue? I would love to hear what you've noticed. Sometimes you'll return in 5 minutes. Sometimes it takes 5 months. Both are okay. Both are human. Healing has never been a straight line. It's not a race to see who can stay centered the longest or who can drift the least. Life will pull you in different directions. Your nervous system will react. Old patterns will resurface. Seasons will shift, and so will you. Drifting doesn't mean you've failed. It doesn't erase your progress or cancel out everything you've learned. It simply means you're alive, moving through a world that is constantly changing. Healing isn't measured by how often you drift. It's measured by how gently you return, by the softness in your voice when you speak to yourself after wandering, by the compassion you offer your own humanity, by the way you choose to come back without punishment, without shame, without making yourself wrong for being human. The return is the healing. The gentleness is the growth. And every time you come back, whether it takes minutes or months, you strengthen the path home. One realization changed everything for me. A single shift in the question I was asking myself. A shift so small it almost felt insignificant, but it opened an entirely new path. I stopped asking, how do I become the person I'm meant to be? That question kept me chasing. It kept me striving. It kept me believing that who I was somewhere out there, in the future, in the next breakthrough, in the next version of myself I hadn't reached yet. And I started asking, what would help me return to myself today? Not someday, not when I've healed more, not when I've figured everything out. Today. That question changed the entire direction of my life, because suddenly growth wasn't about becoming. It wasn't about fixing. It wasn't about earning my next way into worthiness. Growth wasn't exhausting anymore. It became compassionate. It became a conversation with myself instead of a battle against myself. It became a practice of coming home instead of a pursuit of becoming something new. And that one shift from becoming to returning turned the whole journey into something gentler, truer, and far more human. Today, I want you to ask yourself 3 questions, not as a test, not as a way to judge yourself, but as a gentle check-in, a way of turning toward yourself instead of away. First, where have I been shrinking, rushing, pleasing, or performing because fear felt safer than honesty? Then ask, what practices, places, people, or moments bring me back into my body, back into my breath, back into the version of me that feels real and grounded? And finally, what's one small thing I can do today to return? The beautiful thing about returning to yourself is that you never have to earn it. You don't have to become worthy of it. You don't have to wait until you've healed enough. You can begin exactly where you are, every single day. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this entire series is this: you were never meant to spend your life becoming someone else. Not a shinier version of you, not a more acceptable version, not a version shaped by fear or pressure or comparison. You were meant to remember yourself again and again, to return to the truth beneath the noise, to reconnect with the parts of you that were never lost, just buried, quieted, or overlooked. Because the return isn't what happens after the work. The return is the work. The softening, the noticing, the choosing, the coming home. Every breath you take to ground yourself, every moment you pause to listen inward, every time you choose truth over fear, that's the work. Not perfection, not constant centeredness, not becoming someone new. Just remembering, just returning, just finding your way back to yourself as many times as it takes. No matter how far you've wandered, you are never more than one honest moment away from coming home to yourself. I'll see you next time.